The lawyer opened the first envelope at 10:14 a.m. on a Thursday in November, in a boardroom on the fourth floor of a building on Cantonments Road in Accra, and by 10:21 a.m., the man sitting in the back row against the wall already knew what it meant. The room smelled of leather chairs and cold air. The climate control set to 18 degrees in a city sitting at 32 outside. 14 people occupied a glass conference table. One man occupied a straight-backed chair positioned against the wall, as though he had understood, from the moment he stepped into the room, that the table was not where he was supposed to be. The lawyer read the document in the careful voice of a man who had delivered difficult news to many families, and had learned that the news lands harder when it is not accompanied by expressions. He read each name. He read each amount. He paused before the final name on the list. "To Tobenamensa Okafor," the lawyer said. And several people at the table turned toward the man against the wall. Nothing. A man at the far end of the table, the man who had been wearing their father's gold watch since before the old man's body was cold, reached quietly into his jacket pocket and adjusted something there. It was the gesture of a person who believes the accounting is complete. There was a second envelope on the table, sealed, unmarked, sitting beside the lawyer's water glass since 9:47 a.m. No one had asked about it. No one had moved toward it. The man in the chair against the wall had been looking at it since before the reading began. Tobenamensa Okafor was 38 years old. He weighed 71 kilograms, which was 6 kilograms less than he had weighed 3 years prior, before he had moved his savings into re-roofing a school compound in Osu that had been letting in rain since 2020. He was exactly 6 feet tall, and he moved through the world with the practiced economy of a man who had learned not to occupy more space than was offered to him. He had left his father's house 11 years ago, on a Wednesday in early March, with a duffel bag, a mathematics textbook, and a blue pencil case that had belonged to his mother. He had not been asked to leave. He had left because he was 27 years old and had watched his father sit across a dinner table from a business associate and agree to a thing that Efuamensa Okafor, had she still been alive, would have stood up from that table over. He did not say this when he left. He said he needed space. His father had looked at him with the particular look of a man who had built an empire by understanding exactly what things were worth. And that look had settled between them like something placed permanently on a shelf. His mother's name was Efua. She died when Tobena was 9 years old from a kidney illness that progressed faster than the doctors at Korlebu Teaching Hospital in Accra had predicted. She was 34 years old and 51 kilograms when she died, and she had spent the final 3 months of her life teaching Tobena from a hospital bed how to keep financial records. Not how to count money, how to record it. Every transaction, every date, every purpose. In a shorthand she had invented herself, the CD sign she drew like a C with a small loop, the way she wrote the number 7 with a horizontal bar through the stem. She gave him the blue pencil case the morning of the 3rd week. She told him it was the most important thing she owned, because inside it was the first pencil she had ever used to write an account. He carried it in the inside pocket of his jacket to this day. The zip had broken twice. He had repaired it each time with a piece of wire. He had been a secondary school mathematics teacher for 9 years, first at a school in East Legon, then at a small compound school in Osu that he now ran himself. On a side street behind Osu Oxford Street, a blue metal gate, a hand-painted sign that read Mensa Memorial Learning Center, 23 students between the ages of 12 and 18, 11 classrooms, and a monthly rent of 2,400 Ghana cedis. He paid the rent from his own salary and from a standing arrangement with an anonymous donor he had never been able to identify. The anonymous donation had been arriving every month for 4 years, always exactly 1,800 cedis, always on the 5th of the month, always from a bank account registered to a private holding company in Tama. He had tried once to trace it, and had been unable to. After that, he had simply been grateful. He wore, to the reading of the will, his only good suit, a charcoal gray jacket and matching trousers bought from a tailor on Graphic Road in 2018 for 380 Ghana cedis. The trousers had been taken in twice and let out once since then. The jacket was clean. He had pressed it the night before with the small travel iron he kept on the shelf above his kitchen sink, and he had pressed it carefully, the way his mother had taught him to press a shirt. One pass, no dragging. He had not spoken to his father in 6 years. The last time was a Sunday evening phone call in July that lasted 4 minutes. His father had said very little. Tobena had said less. They had sat on either end of the line in the silence that accumulates between two people who both understand what was never said, and have each decided, separately, that it is too late to begin. He had come to the reading because Mr. Dubama Kebe, the family's lawyer, had sent him a formal notice by post. Not by email, by post, in a white envelope with a handwritten address. He had come not expecting to receive anything. He had come because his father was dead, and this was the last official gathering of his father's life. And there is a kind of dignity in showing up for a thing even when the thing does not include you. He had noticed the second envelope the moment he sat down. It was positioned on the table in exactly the spot where his father used to place his blue ledger at the dinner table when he intended to discuss something of consequence. Tobena had learned by the age of 12 that when the ledger appeared on the dinner table, you finished eating and paid attention. He did not know whether anyone else in the room had noticed the second envelope. He suspected no one had. Chief Kwame Mensah Okafor had built his empire from a single transport company he inherited at 29. 3 Datsun trucks and a depot in Tama, into a logistics and real estate conglomerate that, at the time of his death at 74, held operating interests in 7 companies, 2 commercial properties on Bordean Road in Lagos, and a 12-hectare industrial estate outside Kumasi. He had done all of this with the precision of a man who slept 4 hours a night and trusted almost no one. His younger son, Gerald, had been the person he trusted most in the last decade. Gerald was 32 years old, and he wore their father's gold Seiko watch, a watch the old man had purchased in Dubai in 1987, the year the first Datsun was replaced by a fleet of 12, on his left wrist as though he had always worn it there. Gerald had been managing the estate operations since 2020, when his father's health began its slow retreat. He sat at the head of the conference table that morning. He had chosen that seat himself when the boardroom was being arranged, which told you everything you needed to know about Gerald. The receptionist at the estate office had asked Tobena for his identification twice. When he arrived at 9:38 a.m., she looked at him the way certain people look at a man who has arrived at the right building, but possibly the wrong life, noting the suit that was almost enough, the shoes that were good, but not new, the absence of car keys carried loosely in the hand. She had not asked Gerald for identification. Gerald had car keys, and she recognized the car. There were 14 people in that boardroom, and the reading of the first will took 11 minutes. Gerald received controlling interest in 4 of the 7 companies, 2 residential properties in cantonments, and a cash distribution of 4.2 million Ghana cedis. The half-siblings received amounts that were fair but not large. The business associates received modest parcels. The accountant received a year's salary as a bequest. And then the last name on the list, and nothing. Gerald allowed himself one small, restrained smile. He pressed his lips together and looked at the table. 3 of the half-siblings turned toward Tobena. One looked away quickly. Two held the look long enough that it became a sentence. Tobena looked at the second envelope. He left the boardroom at 10:43 a.m. He did not speak to anyone. Gerald was already moving through the room with the posture of a man beginning to receive congratulations. One half-sibling touched Tobena's arm at the door, the youngest, a woman named Nana, who had always been kind in the careful, qualified way of people who are kind when kindness costs them nothing. "I'm sorry," she said. Tobena nodded once and kept walking. He walked out of the building on Cantonments Road into the November heat, which is the kind of heat that settles onto the shoulders and stays. He walked 11 minutes to the Tro station at Donghua Circle. He did not stop once. He paid 3 cedis for the Tro to Osu and took the window seat and watched a cra pass by in the way it always passed, the fuel stations and the signboards, and the women with baskets navigating between cars in standstill traffic, with the practiced ease of people accustomed to systems that were not designed around their movements. He was thinking about the school. The 2,400 cedi rent was due in 11 days. He had 847 cedis in his bank account and 160 in his wallet. The anonymous 1 in 800 cedi donation had arrived on the 5th of the month, 9 days ago, which meant it had already been absorbed into October's shortfall. He had 3 students who had not paid school fees for the current term, which he had not raised with their families, because he knew those families and he knew what the term had cost them. He had a mathematics competition scheduled for Friday at the University of Ghana campus at Legon. His best student, a girl named Amma, 14 years old, with a gift for numerical pattern recognition that Tobena had not encountered in 20 years of teaching, was preparing for it with a focused intensity that made him want to make absolutely certain the school was still open when Friday came. He got off the Tro in Osu and walked 4 blocks to the compound. The November air on the side streets smelled of coal pot smoke and roasted corn, and the faint chemical sweetness of the drains when the afternoon heat has been on them since morning. He turned the corner onto the street and stopped at the blue gate. On the wall to the left of the gate, at eye level, there was a small brushed aluminum plaque, 15 by 10 centimeters. Text engraved in a plain font, in continuing memory of EMO, Donor Supporter 2020, he had assumed, when it appeared on the wall 4 years ago, there one Thursday when it had not been there on Monday, that it had been placed by the church 2 streets over, which occasionally made charitable gestures without announcement. He had looked at it twice in 4 years. He walked past it twice every day. He went inside. He checked on the 3 students finishing afternoon tutoring. He unlocked his office at the back of the compound and sat down in the chair and opened his wallet and looked at the 160 cedis for a long time. On his desk were 14 unmarked exercise books waiting to be graded and the blue pencil case with the wired zip. He was not thinking about what had not been left to him. He was thinking about whether he needed to cut the morning teaching hours to reduce electricity costs before the end of the month, and whether Alma's family could manage public transport to Legon on Friday if he could not afford the small bus. His phone rang at 7:14 p.m. He had been eating rice and Contamire stew at his desk. The number was unfamiliar. He answered on the 4th ring. The voice on the other end was old and certain and smelled, somehow, even through the phone, of shea butter and roasted groundnuts. He did not know how a voice could carry a smell. This one did. "This is Constance," the voice said. "I was your father's cook for 31 years. I think you don't know my name." He said he did not. "Miss, Akebe needs to give you something," she said. "Tonight. Come back to the house." He arrived at his father's house in Cantonments at 8:52 p.m. The house sat behind a high wall on a quiet street. He had not been inside it in 6 years. The security guard took 45 seconds on a phone call before opening the gate. The garden was exactly the same as he remembered. The bougainvillea along the left wall was the same bougainvillea he had climbed at 10 years old. Now taller by a full meter, now reaching over the top of the wall. Madame Constance was standing on the front steps. She was 67 years old and approximately 52 kilograms. She wore a dark Kente print dress and flat shoes, and she smelled exactly the way he had expected. She looked at him with the expression of a person who has been waiting to do something for a long time and is finally being permitted to do it. She said, "Come inside." The living room was empty. Gerald had been there earlier. There was the impression of a jacket over one chair, since removed, and a glass with a dried ring at the bottom on the side table, the particular quiet of a room that was recently occupied. He thought she was going to give him his mother's things. A photograph, possibly. His mother's Bible. Something the house had kept for 29 years and was only now, with the old man gone, being returned. That was what he had come back expecting. He was already composing a way to be grateful for something small. Madame Constance did not lead him to the living room. She led him to his father's study. Mr. Dubem-Akebe was seated behind the desk. He was 63 years old, and he wore a plain gray suit, and he had the careful stillness of a man who had spent 28 years carrying other people's most consequential documents and had learned to hold things level. The second envelope was in front of him, still sealed. On the corner of the desk was a blue ledger. It had been there since the morning. Tobena had not seen it at the reading because it had been positioned behind the lawyer's briefcase. But it was the same format as his mother's ledgers. The same blue. The same dimensions. From where he was sitting, he could not read the cover clearly, but the handwriting on the label looked like it had been written in a specific shorthand he had not seen anyone else use in 29 years. He sat down. He did not say anything. If this story is already pulling at something in you, subscribe now, because what Tobena finds in that ledger is what changes the direction of everything that follows. Madame Constance sat in the chair against the wall, folded her hands in her lap, and said, "He came to see the school in March. Every March. For 11 years. He never told you because he knew that if he told you, certain people would find a way to use you as a tool against him." Tobena looked at her. "Gerald," she said, simply, the way you name a weather pattern. Not with anger. With the precision of someone who has been watching a thing for a long time and no longer needs to raise their voice about it. She said that for the last 6 years of Chief Mensa Okafor's life, Gerald had been quietly moving the estate's assets toward his own position. Not taking, not precisely, but managing the inheritance the way a river manages a landscape. Slowly, patiently, rerouting the terrain. She said the chief had known, and had found in that knowledge a specific kind of grief that he did not have the language to speak aloud. He had understood that if he named Tobena openly, as a favored son, Gerald would have found ways to entangle him in the business, to pull Tobena into disputes, to make him a hostage in a negotiation he had not agreed to enter. "So he kept you outside the table," Madame Constance said, "to keep you safe from what was beneath it." Mr. Akebe uncapped his pen. He did not speak yet. He opened the second envelope the way a man opens something he has been carrying carefully for a long time and is finally permitted to set down, and he placed 4 documents on the desk in a measured row. The first was a letter. 2 pages, handwritten, the angular, compressed letters of his father's hand, the same hand that had written birthday cards for him until he was 12, and then stopped. The ink was blue. The second was a land title document. A 14-acre plot in East Legan, Accra, registered in the full legal name of Tobena Mensah Okafor on March 17, 2009. He had been 23 years old in March 2009. He had been a second-year university student, sharing a room with two others near Legon campus, and he had 40 cedis in his wallet on most days. 14 acres in East Legon. He looked at the document. He looked at Mr. Akebe. The current valuation, Mrs. Akebe said, is in the letter. The third document was a printout of 48 bank transfer records, monthly transfers from a private holding company registered in Tema to the account of Mensah Memorial Learning Center, OSU. Each transfer, 1,900 Ghana cedis. Each dated the 5th of the month. The first dated September 5, 2020. The fourth document was the blue ledger. Mr. Achebe moved it from the corner of the desk to the center. Tobena opened it. The handwriting on the entries was not his mother's. His mother had been gone for 29 years. But the shorthand was hers. The C with the small loop. The 7 with the horizontal bar through the stem. His father had learned his mother's shorthand. The private accounting language Efua Mensah Okafor had invented in a hospital bed and taught her 9-year-old son in the 3 months before she died, and he had been using it to record his private accounts for 22 years. Tobena closed the ledger. He looked at the plaque. He opened it again. He closed it again. The plaque on the wall at the school gate. In continuing memory of Emo, Efua Mensah Okafor, not the church 2 streets over. His father, walking past that gate in March of 2020, pressing a small aluminum plaque to the wall with his own hands in the name of a woman he had loved and lost and never found adequate words for in the 30 years since. He had walked past that plaque 1,460 times. He opened the letter. It began without a salutation. His father had never used first names when precision was available. It said, "The land in East Legon was purchased in your name in 2009 because I knew by then what kind of man you were becoming, and I knew a man of that kind would eventually need land that belonged to him and no one else. I did not tell you because you were 23, and because certain explanations required time I did not have yet. I am writing this because I have run out of it." It said, "I was proud of the school. I should have told you. I walked past the gate in March every year, and I heard the students inside, and I thought about your mother, and about whether she would have found a way to say this better than I could. She would have. She always could." It said, "The first will was not a punishment. The first will was an instruction." The people in that room needed to see nothing. They needed to believe the accounting was finished. What is in the second envelope is between you and me. No one in that room was entitled to it. It said, "I know you still have your mother's pencil case. Keep it." Mr. Akebe placed his hands flat on the desk. He looked at Tobena steadily, with the expression of a man who has been holding something level for 28 years and is finally setting it down in the right place. "The land in East Legon," Miss Akebe said, "was independently valued in August of this year." He paused. "The current valuation is 11.4 million Ghana cedis." Tobena set the letter down. The study was quiet. Outside the window, the bougainvillea moved in a night breeze. A clock somewhere in the house ticked the way his father's clocks had always ticked, precisely, without sentiment. Madame Constance placed a mug of ginger tea beside his right hand. She did not say anything. Gerald arrived at 9:31 p.m. He had been called by Mr. Akebe's assistant at 8:44 p.m., a call that said only there was a second document to be reviewed, and his presence was required. He came in wearing the jacket he had left draped over the living room chair that afternoon, which told you he had returned to the house in between and had been waiting nearby. He stopped when he saw Tobena in the chair across from the desk. He looked at the documents arranged on the desk. He looked at Mr. Akebe. Mr. Akebe turned the land title to its second page and placed it on the edge of the desk nearest to Gerald. He did not stand up. "This was registered in March 2009, Mr. Achebe said. Continuously renewed since. No instrument in Ghanaian property law allows contest." Gerald's hand moved toward the document, then came back to his side. The gold watch caught the lamplight. "The holding company making monthly transfers to the school," Mr. Achebe said, "was a vehicle of the estate and will be dissolved during probate. However, the chief's letter establishes a standing instruction for the school's operating costs to be maintained at the same level from the estate's charitable trust until 2035. This instruction is binding." Gerald said, "I'd like to speak with my own lawyers." "Certainly," Mr. Akebe said. Tonight is fine." He picked up his phone and dialed one number. The call lasted 38 seconds. He placed the phone back on the desk. He looked at Gerald with the settled expression of a man who has been carrying something in both hands for a very long time and has finally found the surface it was meant for. Gerald looked at Tobena one time more. His right hand moved to the gold watch at his wrist. It stayed there. He did not remove it. He walked to the study door, and he stopped in the doorframe for a moment without turning around, and he said nothing, and he walked out. 2 weeks later, following a review initiated by the estate's independent auditors, a review Mr. Akebe had been preparing to request for the better part of a year, and had been waiting for the right conditions to file. Gerald's role as estate manager was suspended pending a formal accounting of decisions made between 2020 and 2024. The review was not about the will. The review was about 6.3 million cedis of estate capital that had, over 4 years, moved toward Gerald's personal holding companies through a system of management fee arrangements that were legal in form and imprecise in purpose. The Chief's Charitable Foundation, which Gerald had quietly defunded in 2022, was reinstated with its full original endowment. Tobena was appointed to the Foundation's Board of Trustees. Madame Constance was appointed Community Liaison, a role that had not existed before that night, and which Mr. Akebe drafted into the Foundation's charter before he left the study at 11:17 p.m. Chief Kwame Mensah Okafor left his son nothing in the first envelope. The people in that boardroom saw a man discarded by the father who built everything. A man who had chosen to be poor, as certain relatives had always put it, and had now been confirmed in that choice by the last document of his own father's life. But what the first envelope could not say, and what Gerald could not count, and what no one in that boardroom was equipped to receive, was what the second envelope had always contained. A piece of land registered 16 years earlier in the name of a 23-year-old mathematics student, because a father who could not find the spoken words had written them in the only language still available to him, the language of accounts, the language of records, the shorthand his wife had invented in a hospital bed and passed to their son in a blue pencil case before she was gone. You cannot always hear what a person is telling you at the moment they are saying it. Some truths are placed quietly in the ground and take years to rise. A door that closes on a Wednesday does not always mean what it appeared to mean. Sometimes the people who were kept outside the table were being kept away from what was underneath it. By the following March, Tobena had not sold the land. He had used the title as collateral for a low-interest building loan, which he was using to construct a proper school facility on the 14-acre site in East Legon. A real building, with 16 classrooms, a mathematics and science wing, and a courtyard open to the morning light. He gave the same sign painter who had lettered the blue gate in Osu the contract for the new sign. He asked for the same slightly too light blue. Some things are worth keeping imprecise. Amma won the mathematics competition that Friday. She won by a margin of 14 points. On the morning the new school's foundation was poured, a Thursday in early November, exactly 1 year after the will was read, Tobena stood at the edge of the site in East Legan with his jacket on and the pencil case in his inside pocket. The air smelled of red laterite soil turned fresh by the morning and wet concrete setting and the particular green certainty that Accra carries in November when the rains have been and gone and the trees are at their most resolved. He stood there for 22 minutes, which is approximately how long it takes a person to understand something they have been carrying without knowing. Then, he went to work. If you have a parent who never found the words, I want to ask you something. Not whether they loved you. That is not the question. The question is this. If someone told you that love can be recorded in a ledger, deposited on the 5th of every month for 4 years, pressed into a plaque on a wall you walked past every morning, written in a shorthand that belonged to a woman you both lost, would you know how to read it? And if you found the second envelope after they were gone, would you understand what was always inside it? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooked until they changed everything. I'll see you in the next one.